Thank you so much, Pam. Okay, I have two questions. First of all, how many who are married their best friend? I want to see. Okay, now the second question is, how many of you knew what being best friends in marriage would look like? Liz, come and teach us. Well, obviously, none of us did because it was a whole different thing when we got married. Okay, so we're on a learning curve in our marriage. I've been on it for 42 years, and I'm still on it. And we also want to be more intentional than when we were dating. We want to continue to pursue one another's hearts. You know, I've heard, I'm not a guy, so I don't know, but I've heard that guys pursue, catch, and then the pursuing stops. Now, I'm not getting down on guys, it's just what I heard. But women also need to pursue their husbands. So it's a two-way street in marriage if we're going to have the marriage that God wants us to have. Okay. Let me see here. I'm going to number 1, the primary foundation stones. In order to have a really strong, best friendship in marriage, we have to lay some foundation in order to build on it, or at least be sure that it's already laid. Hopefully it is. So the first one is commitment and trust. We've counseled a lot of couples, so we know that this is not always in place in every marriage. So we want to be sure that it is. And what I mean by that is that both husband and wife agree that no matter what's going on, no one's going anywhere. We're going to stick it through by God's help and probably build a stronger marriage in that because, you know, he takes us through the places that are rough and we come out on the other side looking even better than when we started. So if there is even a hint of distrust in any of you guys' marriages, I really encourage you to do some things. As hard as it might feel, talk about it. If you don't trust each other, it's very hard to talk to each other, period, much less talking about that distrust. But that is a really good thing, and we have to be willing to disclose our heart to one another and be willing to work. Marriage is work. So no matter how we look at it, if we want a good marriage, it takes work and sometimes hard work. We want to believe that our marriage is worth whatever it takes. And Mike has shared with you that we have counseled couples where there's been unfaithfulness, and they say it takes at least 2 years for the offended spouse to gain some genuine, stable trust. Now, I hope that's not true of every couple, but that's generally speaking what they say. So it takes time to build trust and commitment. So if you don't have it and you struggle in that area, I want to suggest strongly that you ask the Lord to lead you to someone who can walk you through the process, who can pray with you and walk you through the process, someone who knows what the Lord is saying about your marriage. Okay, the second foundation stone before we can lay the friendship firmly is unconditional acceptance. When asked about marriage, a wise, newly married young man said this: marriage is death. And it is. Get two people together and they're not always going to get their own way. It just doesn't work that way. And that's God's design, because he wants to teach us how to, like we were talking earlier, die to ourselves. So it's going to take work and a willingness to lay things down. Now, any believer needs to have that willingness to lay things down, because that's what it's all about. It's us and it's him, and it's about our spouse if we're married. So This lifestyle makes all the difference in the quality of our relationship. So, an important part of this process is accepting each other as we are. Whoa, that could be hard. And it is hard because we are so different, because opposites attract. It's challenging because neither one of us are far from perfect. But the truth is that if we want to either remain or rebuild or build stronger our best friendship in marriage, it's going to take this to do it. We have to have the commitment, and we have to have the willingness to accept one another. And what the Lord invites us into prayer is to pray for our spouse, to pray for ourselves, because we need his help. We really need his help. And so prayer is it should be another one of those pillars or those foundations is prayer. Praying just yourself with the Lord, like we talked about this morning, and then interceding for your spouse, yourself, your family, and whomever he lays on your heart to pray for. So prayer for a husband or a wife can be one of the kindest, most unselfish things we can do in our marriage. And I might add, it's probably the most effective thing we can do in our marriage. And again, if we need help, reach out for it. There are those leaders that can sit with you, pray with you, walk you through, talk you through what's going on in your relationship. So I mentioned that opposites attract. So our spouse is just as unique as we are, very unique compared to us, because we are so different. And one thing that I have learned in my marriage after 42 years is that I really am amazed at how different Mike and I are. The way we think, the way we just go about things, very, very different. But the beautiful thing I've come to realize is that I need Mike to be different. If he was like me, that wouldn't be very good. That's why God causes opposites to attract, because we need what the other one has, and they need what we have in order to fit together as a couple. Okay. Now, often the Lord will use Mike's differences to teach me something he wants me to learn. And I'm sure the same could be said for him. So God drew us together. He didn't make a mistake. He's not up there wringing his hands if anybody's having a dilemma in their marriage right now. He drew us together, and he can equip us to be all we need to be for our spouse. He can. But we have to be willing to reach out for that. So if the foundations of commitment, trust, unconditional acceptance are in place in our relationship, however imperfectly that may be, we are on our way to having a wonderful, growing, best friendship. Now I want to talk about some practicals, and these are practical ways that really bind our hearts together and cause our hearts to come alive for one another. There's a whole bunch of them, and I'm not saying you need to just make a list and check them off and do every single one. That's not the point. The point is to give you some ideas. And I love the first one. Did you know that the elements of humor, laughter, and smiling can enrich our relationship greatly? Proverbs 17:22 says a verse you're all familiar with, a merry heart does good like a medicine. A medicine. The Word of God says if we are happy, it's a medicine for our relationship. And even when things are challenging or difficult in our marriage, looking for a way to bring humor into the situation can be really helpful and healing. And I totally get it. In the heat of the moment, levity is not something we naturally lean into. Yet because the Lord cares about our marriage, he cares about us, he can give us the grace to choose it. I mean, that's the verse that I used in earlier was that God gives us all things pertaining to life and godliness. So if it feels like, oh man, I can't tolerate this in my spouse, wrong. God can give you the grace because he helps us with all things. And then when things are going well in our relationship, humor and laughter serve to bond our hearts in a very special way. Very, very, it's like something just between the two of you. And it's not a big, deep thing, but it's light and it's funny. And Mike and I have a few phrases, humorous phrases that we use in our marriage, and I'm just going to tell you about one of them. I think you've probably all seen It's a Wonderful Life. Who hasn't seen It's a Wonderful Life? You need to see it. It's so good. It's so good. Well, most of you will remember this scene then. George is a teenager. He's working in the soda shop, and there's two young ladies on stools in front of the soda shop counter. And so one of the girls she's kind of flirty, and she really likes George, and she turns to him when he comes around the counter to pick up something that he needs to get, and she says, "Help me down, Georgie." And he said, "Help you down?" So, in other words, she asked George to do something for her, and he was not going to have any part of it. He was very irritated with this young lady that she would even say such a thing. So, in our marriage, frequently, I will ask Mike to help me with something. And sometimes he will say, not in a negative way, but in a light, playful way, "Help you down," and we just both laugh. It just brings laughter and fun and enjoyment into our relationship, and I love that. I won't take time to share any more, but we have others. Okay, now here's a question which pertains to your marriage but can pertain to anything in your life. Has anyone ever smiled at you and just made you feel better? Like people like myself and Liz and her sister Naomi, we are outgoing people. We get into an elevator and we say good morning to the people in the elevator and we smile at them. I had these two men get in an elevator with me a while ago, and they just looked like, normal working guys, and I kind of asked them how they were doing, and somebody said something kind of like they were struggling with something or whatever, and I said, well, Jesus loves you, and he can help you. And then it was time to get off the elevator, so I couldn't go into a full witness there. But I trust that smiling at them and just showing care for their hearts was helpful. So smile, 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 smile. That's something that's really, really important. And it's free. We can give it away in a grocery store. You just don't know what you're doing to the heart of a person when you smile at them. Even though you're a stranger, they might think it's odd, but that's okay. Okay, so enjoying time together. Mike and I take a weekly date, which granted, when we had small children, we didn't go weekly, but we did go. I had almost forgotten, and I asked Mike, did we have dates when the kids were little? Because I'm going to advise you to do that. He said, yeah, remember the babysitters we had? And I remember the babysitters more than actually having a date. So we used to have dates. We'd go out to eat, and we'd talk. And what we do now is return home, and we watch a movie or a British detective program. Oh, my gosh. There's this one, it's called Vera. And the head detective is somebody around my age, maybe a little younger. So it's fun. It's fun. We love it. We're waiting for her to come out again in the fall. So we have other ones, too, that we watch. Sometimes we might kind of break the mold and just play a board game. We love board games. We love to have people over to play board games. The great thing about board games compared to sitting in front of a box and looking is that you're not talking, or you're not supposed to be talking. Sometimes I do, and my husband reminds me, you're not supposed to be talking. Yes, sir. Yes. But when you play a game, you can actually communicate with one another. You can have a conversation. You can get to know somebody that maybe you've had over for the first time. And then sometimes, not too often, but sometimes we will go into our living room, we both have our books, and we just sit down and read. We just like being together in the same room. So those are, just some thoughts about what you might do. And I know when you have small children, we had 3 children, but they were very close in age. 1, and then number 2, and then we skipped 2 years and had number 3. So they were very close in age, and we homeschooled, and we had our routine, and we would always, after they were all ready for bed, we would sit down and we would read. And sometimes Mommy would do something mommies shouldn't do. I literally started falling asleep. But I did something that most people can't do. I didn't do it on purpose. But I'm still talking while I'm falling asleep. But it has nothing to do with the book that is in front of me. And so, of course, they all know that I'm falling asleep, but it was fun. It was fun. So anyways, I loved those days of routine, putting the children down at a certain time. That's very healthy if you can do it, because you need time with you and your husband, or you might just need quiet time yourself. But our children are a blessing from the Lord. And I love talking about parenting. I'm not going to do that now, but that's one of the things I love to do. Thanks to Liz Baran, who recommended a book to me when I was speaking on parenting to a group years ago. If you want a really good book, it's called Shepherding a Child's Heart by Ted Tripp. It's an amazing book. You'll love it if you read it. Okay, so anyways, my point is, by the time they are in bed, you are like ready to go to bed yourself. You're just exhausted. But once a week, I recommend that you at least take time together, whether it's sitting on the couch talking, trying to stay awake, or whether it's going for a walk or whatever. You can do things at home without needing a babysitter. If you can get a babysitter, that's even better. So conversation is a really important thing. And Mike's going to talk about this later, but did you know there are 4 areas of intimacy in marriage? Now, I know you know what the first one is, and that's an important one. The sexual relationship is very important. But there's also intellectual intimacy, and there is emotional intimacy, and most important, spiritual intimacy, being connected, being like-minded in your relationship with the Lord. So those are very important. And the last 3 all require conversation to happen. We have to be willing to talk to one another. So make conversation a priority as much as possible. Mike and I sometimes, during the week and during the day, we happen to be there at the same time. We'll share things with one another. Newsy stuff is great. That's part of the intellectual. But whatever you can do to just connect together is really, really helpful for building that best friendship. Okay. Be careful not to take each other for granted. Now, is that hard to do in marriage? Taking each other for granted? It's not hard. It's so easy. We live our day in and day out, our routines, and it's so easy to take one another for granted. So it takes effort. And so everything I'm going to share with you from now on requires effort. Effort ain't no fun when you're tired or if you got 20 bazillion things to do, but it's worth it to take the time and the effort to do it. So, one of the ways that we can not take one another for granted is to say, gee, honey, thank you so much for what you did. Or, I'm so thankful for you. Just short phrases, but they connect. And with a man, wives, you probably know that husbands need affirmation. After all, the scriptures say respect is what husbands need most. And love is what we need most. And the way you spell love to a woman is different than the way you spell love to a man, which I won't go into that right now. But anyways, it's easy to take each other for granted, and affirmation is a huge building block for great friendship. And the hard part about all this is being sure that we are mindful and that we ask the Holy Spirit's help when he shows us something and we're like, oh yeah. Like when Mike does things, and he does a lot of things, I always want to say, thank you. I appreciate what you just did. Because it just really helped me a lot, and it made me know that he cared for me. And so if I didn't tell him those things, if I didn't say thank you or, oh, you did a great job on this, or whatever it is, he wouldn't know. I'd know it, but he wouldn't know. And he needs to know. Our husbands need to know, and our wives need to know. Preferring one another is so important, and selfishness in a marriage will stunt the growth of the friendship. In our marriage, Mike is far better at preferring me than I am him. I still have a long way to go in this area. Even at my age, I still have a long way to go, but I'm willing to go the distance with God's help. Now, I've been to a lot of weddings, and not all weddings include these words as I think they used to love and to cherish. Well, love is one thing, but what is cherishing? And so cherishing is to protect and care for lovingly. Whether it's an emotional thing, whether it's a physical thing, whatever it is, we want to cherish one another, not just in our hearts, but letting our spouse know that we feel cherished by them. Like I feel cherished by Mike when he does things around the house for me. It tells me that he cares for me. He's thinking about me. He's trying to lighten the load that I carry. And I also feel cherished when he brings me home kombucha. Do you guys know what kombucha is? Okay. We were just in the South, in the country, and most people didn't know what kombucha was, or they went, ooh, which is what I did the first time my husband brought some home for me. I didn't like it, but I developed a taste very quickly for kombucha, and he knows that, so he brought it for me. So, okay, we'll move on to something you have not heard one word about this whole time. Authenticity and openness. Temperamentally, this doesn't come easy for some. If you're a kind of quiet person, you're not really into sharing your deep feelings. But God desires that a husband and a wife share their deep feelings with each other. Mike talked about if you don't share it with your spouse, they're going to find somebody else to share it with. And that could get sticky, as well as the fact that you don't even know what's going on in your spouse's life. Now, men find it more challenging to really talk about what they're feeling or experiencing by and large. We've seen marriages where it's reversed, and that's all part of the brain chemistry that God gave us in our genders. I would love to talk about gender for a long time because it's so cool, but that's not the time for it. So whether we have struggles or whether we have joys, authenticity and openness are the cement in a best friendship relationship. So it means being willing to trust. We talked about that earlier. It's one of the foundation stones. To trust and to be open and willing to open our hearts to each other. Sharing our heart can be stretching, but allow me to encourage you that if, no matter how difficult it may feel, if you want a great marriage, this is very important for building and maintaining a best friendship. Being willing to share your heart with your spouse, even when it isn't pretty. I do that with my husband all the time, and it's not usually pretty. But he loves me anyway. Okay, number 7, intentionally sharing the work at home. Now, we have a couple that we are counseling right now, and they actually have lists of things that the husband does and lists of things that the wives do. They both work outside the home, and I think that's great. But we need to be aware that our spouse just might need our help, whether it's the wife or the husband. we need help in the home. We need to be able to get things peaceful and settled in our home with both of us working at it. And we lead a busy life, whether we're a stay-at-home mom. To me, that's one of the busiest lives you can lead. But I want to tell you, ladies, it's one of the most rewarding. Love it, love it, love it, love it. And so, even though we have a very busy day, taking just a little time to do something for our spouse, especially when our schedule is pretty full, speaks loudly to them. Oh, they have so much to do today, and look what they just did for me. That's further cement in that best friendship. It just draws you together and helps that love to grow. Now, I want to say that a busy life can be a detriment to a marriage. You can have a marriage, but it's not going to be God's best when you're too busy. So I could say a lot about that, but I will not go there right now. Okay. So we need to be intentional to guard our relationship. We have to guard it. It's not like it was when we were dating, and many of you have been married long enough to know that it requires a lot more intentionality once you're actually married than it did when you were dating. So here's a couple ways I've felt Mike's intentionality. Most often, Mike will do the dishes after dinner. I didn't ask him to. He just goes out and does them. And I feel like he's telling me that he appreciates my preparing dinner, and we actually work together. He goes to the sink and does the dishes part, and I'll clean off the counters and put things away. But we're a team, and we do it together, and that's bonding, even though we may not even be saying anything to one another. Mike and I mainly have different schedules unless we're counseling together, and then we're together in our counseling room, which is our dining room. And there have been times, now men, don't get nervous, but there have been times when I've come home and my husband has washed the kitchen floor. Yeah. Amen. Amen. So, men, I'm not telling you you have to do that by any means. The Lord can show you meaningful ways to bless your wife, to connect with her heart, to pursue her heart, besides washing the floor. But I bet she'd love it if you did it. Okay. I try to sneak in ways to cherish Mike. It's hard. It's hard because he's just so good. For instance, he loves breakfast, and he fixes it for himself because I rarely eat breakfast. And after he finishes eating, he goes to the sink. I'm in another room. He goes to the sink, and he cleans up everything after himself. Now, how does that make you feel as a woman, that your husband's out there cleaning up? I mean, yeah, he made the mess, so he should. But still, it's still an act of love. And so what I do is I try to, our dining room is to the left of our kitchen, and our sink is down a little further. So I will try to sneak into the kitchen and clean up all of his breakfast stuff because I don't want him to have to do it. And I so appreciate him and all that he does for me, and I want to show my cherishing to him. So if you feel inclined, ask the Lord of ideas how to lighten your spouse's responsibilities, and then ask God for creative ways to make it happen in your schedule. That's the hardest part. Okay, number 8, caring for each other's heart in an intentional way. Because life can be so busy, we can easily miss knowing each other's heart in a particular season. Our spouse might be going through something in that season, and we don't even know it. And so we need to be able to be willing. Again, it's that openness, it's that transparency, that authenticity to share what is going on in our hearts. I mean, for Mike and I, that comes easy. We've always done it. But I know it's not easy for every couple to do that. One spouse just might kind of shy away from that. But again, the topic of this is being best friends in marriage, and this is one of the ways that you can show your love, your care, your pursuing for your spouse. And for women, I know I tried this with my boys. Don't ask, how was your day, sweetheart? Fine. No. Something like, tell me about something that was really hard or really fun in your day. Because then they have to use more than one word to answer that question. And so be sure you ask, frame it kind of broadly, because you don't want to hear fine all the time. And I don't get that from my husband, but I might have gotten it from my boys when they were younger. Okay, and I might add, when we are framing questions to our husband or to our sons, we want to do it in a way that is a quality conversation. We want to do it in a way that is respectful, because our boys need respect just as much as our husbands do, and at the right time. And this is what I really need work on. He's just about to go out this door, and I think of, it's the wrong time, man. No. And so it's something I'm working on, trying to be mindful that he might have a lot on his mind, plus he needs to get somewhere on a certain time. And so I don't want to stop him from doing that, and I want him to have the free and clear mind, which, by the way, melancholics really need that time to process things. Now, for men, before we get to men, I want to say something more about women, that we women were designed for communication which leads to connecting with our spouse. We want to connect. And Emerson Eggerichs, who's, I don't know if you've heard of me, wrote Love and Respect. He said that women do something in order to connect. It's like a cry to connect. So we probably all do certain things that maybe we shouldn't, because we're crying out for connection with our spouse, because it's just so important. So women were designed for that connection. But the thing is, for men, it's really hard because our husbands were not necessarily designed for this kind of communication. So, agape love. Who can tell me quickly what agape love is? Okay, thank you. So, the husband may not feel like telling his wife about his day in a valid, extensive enough way to help her to know where he's at in his heart. But agape love can help him to do that. Just like agape love helps wives in certain areas that we may not be 100% jumping for joy about, but we want to minister to our husbands. So we reach out for God's agape love to do that. I mean, marriage is all about agape, among other areas of loves and other types of love. But we need to agape each other, like you just said, doing something for someone that you don't feel like doing. All right. Make provision for your spouse to have time alone. This is really important. Now, if your husband is kind of a quiet, laid-back guy like my husband, he needs it more than maybe most would. But the reality of it is, I am an extrovert. Oh, you haven't been able to tell that, have you? I'm an extrovert, but I need that time alone. I need it. I covet it. It's mainly my time with the Lord, but it's really, really important to me. And my husband honors that. So we wives want to honor our husbands and allow them that time that they need just to be alone, not to come ask questions. And did you know that men have a nothing box? Men have a nothing box. Now, I have to talk to God about that when I see him, because I don't think that's very fair, because I think we women should have a nothing box too, so we can go in there and just shut everything out like men can. But we need to let him go into his nothing box and not complain about that. Okay, the last practical tool I want to share is this. we all need time to spend with our friends, our same-sex friends. And women have a greater need than men do in this area, but men still have a need for it. And so we need to be willing, first of all, dads of young children, make allowances for this to happen for your wife. Figure out time that you can just release her from her motherhood responsibilities so she can have time to go and be refreshed with her friends. And the cool thing about it is when a woman is refreshed with her friends, she is a lot less needing to connect with her husband in that moment. So it's actually a good thing for husbands to make room for their wives to spend time with friends. But also, like I said, men need this as well. And I'm really blessed to see the friends that my husband has in his life and what they mean to him. Okay. So I want to close by saying, mentioning what I said earlier, don't feel overwhelmed by all these things. I mean, perhaps the Lord has already spoken to you about something, that sounds like something I'd like to do. And your husband or your wife may have a totally different one. So that's awesome. Get up and run with it. Do it, because you will bless your marriage immensely by just plugging into these ways to be pursuing one another's hearts very intentionally. And I know we're in a different place in our journey. Some of you may be doing a lot of these things already, or perhaps you're just beginning, but don't feel overwhelmed. These are suggestions to grow your friendship relationship. Just begin where you can. You know, don't take these notes or whatever and just kind of throw them in the trash and go, oh, that was nice. But actually, my heart, and I believe it's God's heart, is that you would actually pinpoint something and you would do it. You're going to need God's help to do it if you haven't done it before. But he is more than happy to help you with that, whether it's a husband or a wife. And we need to be patient with ourselves and our spouse because we might temporarily forget what it was we were working on. That's okay. Now, I'm going to tell you something kind of silly. But one of the things I chose to do to cherish my husband is this. I use liquid soap in the shower. He uses a bar of soap. So I can see when that bar is getting really low. And sometimes I'll look at it and I'll go, oh, I need to change that when I get out of the shower. And then I forget. But there have been times when I've succeeded, so I'm asking the Lord for help because I just need more ways to cherish my husband because I feel totally cherished by him. Okay, so the Lord's our helper. He desires this best friendship relationship for us more than we do for ourselves. So we'll just let him have his way. And you'd be surprised what he will do. I mean, he's the God of creativity, the God of ingenuity, and he wants to pass that along to all of us for the sake of our marriage. All right.